Okay, the timer is timing. Oh, wow. That was kind of quick. I barely got the timer turned on properly. I just returned to our home in Texas. I didn't have time to find all of the things that I needed to go back and begin to teach the law again. So we've kind of been on this New Testament ish thing, but we're talking about it from the point of Judaism, from the point of, these were the New Testament letters as we know them today, were written by Jewish rabbis to other Jewish rabbis, not their congregants, not just people in general, but these letters were written to by these Jewish rabbis to the Jewish rabbis in these other congregations concerning matters of the Jewish people, the Jewish religion, and the Jewish God. There was no connection to Christianity in any of these letters at all. And I can say that with complete confidence because I have translated the Greek text of the all of it that we have from the New Testament, from the very best that we can get our hands on. Went through the consortium and all of that. I've done the whole thing, and there's no Christianity in it at all, none whatsoever. Um, Yeshua did not say, "On this rock, I'm going to build my church." He said no such thing. He did say on this rock, being the recognition that Mashiach has actually come and done the work of Mashiach, i.e., has returned the children of Israel, the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, to their covenant with God. That's what they were all waiting for at that point in time. And these men were trained to recognize from the prophets the signs and the wonders that they were supposed to see and recognize when Mashiach came. So they wrote these letters to help the other rabbim from various congregations to set things right. The Christianity thing came later, much later. You couldn't even have a new religion up until Constantine won his war. Yeah. After that, then Catholicism came about because of that. But that took about 100 years before they even had a name for Catholicism. In the writings, the way they get translated is as if it was called Catholicism from the beginning, and it wasn't. That Constantine wanted a uh, universal religion. He wanted to take all of the different religious groups of their time and mix them together in one universal religion. It was not called Christianity at the time. Although Eusebius said that they were just starting to use the term Christianon, which is where we get Christian, obviously, but that was not the name of the religion. That was the name of the followers, the people that came together to help develop this universal religion. I have said for many years that the uh, Latin word for universal is Catholic. And just recently, I ran across a reason to think that that may actually come from the Greek. I've always thought of it as Latin. I've never actually seen it written in Greek because I've only read it in Latin material. So I'm a little surprised by that. But either way, the word Catholic means universal. And so when these men were writing to each other in Latin, mostly, almost exclusively, you're talking about the king, and the king's language was Latin, not Greek. Uh, though you do find some of the stuff in Greek, that wasn't what would have been original. The original would have been the Latin. But anyway, so within 100 years, they began to call it the Catholic, uh, I'll use the word religion, they didn't. From there, you start down the road of Christianity. And there is a man that I very highly respect. I think he's absolutely wonderful. I don't know if I should say his name or tell you what he does because he's famous. And if I start talking about that, then I just don't want to get into any kind of legal issue or something like that, which I could imagine him doing something like that. But uh, anyway, I think the world of him. He's very well educated. He's a college professor. Uh, and he's a Jewish man who turned to Christianity. The reason why Jews do that is because there are parts of the Hebrew Bible that are essentially forbidden for the Jews to read because a very long time ago, when the whole Messiah showing up and fulfilling the prophets and all of that, the problem that the Jews had with that when the Catholics came along is that they were taking the words of the prophets and connecting it to their religion. And their religion did not come from the Bible. Their religion did not come as a result of the Jewish Messiah restoring and reinstating the covenant between God and the Jews, which is exactly what the prophets said that he was going to do. Uh, so they eventually just kind of tried to erase that out of Judaism because they feared that the Jews would read the New Testament letters and begin to believe in things that they ought not. And so this is an example of a very well educated man who was Jewish born. And the typical modern Jew, you go to synagogue, maybe not all the time. If you do all the time, you're not really listening or understanding to what's being said. And most of what's being said is not from the Bible, it's from Mishnah or Talmud or Gematria, uh, you name it, right? And so it's not terribly biblical. And there's very little difference in religions. You meet Christians who they'll tell you to your face that they read the Bible all the time. They read it, every day, or they read it from cover to cover every year or something like that. And 99.99999% of the time, they're lying through their teeth. Most of them have just memorized the 4 to 10 verses that their particular denomination really think are important, and they learn to speak the ease, the Christian ease or the Jewish ease or whatever. The truth is, they know nothing about their Bibles, and they know nothing about their religion worth knowing. And that's very unfortunate that it's that way, but it's that way with every religion. This is not something exclusive to any religion. Um, but there are those who do, and they'll read among the Jews, they'll read those forbidden letters because they're in there. I mean, if you get the Jewish Study Bible, which if you're an American Jew and probably English is your first language, you'll get one of those. And you read it, and then you've heard what was written in the New Testament, or you've by this point have read what was in the New Testament. All of a sudden, you're realizing, oh my gosh, these are the same thing. This book written by the prophet is saying this certain things are going to happen at a very specific time. And then at that very specific time, you get these so-called Christians in the Christian New Testament as witnesses. Hundreds and even thousands of people witness these events take place. And in Judaism, essentially two or more witnesses to the same event is almost absolute proof that it took place, right? That's been a thing with us from almost the beginning of our religion. Um, so they start reading that, and the next thing you know, they become a Christian. And the thing that the rabbis feared all those years ago comes true. They don't realize that what they're reading in the so-called New Testament letters, which is really, really wrong to call them that. There's nothing new in those letters. There's no old covenant or new covenant. There's only one covenant, and it was made between God and the Jews, no one else. When God appeared on this planet as a human being, he said himself, it's in red letters in your New Testament letter, book, I am not come. Of course, yours says sent, most likely. That's a terrible translation of the Greek. It should be come, not sent. But he said, I am not come, but for the lost sheep of the house of Yisrael. Of course, you're reading Israel, but you can hear that when I pronounce it correctly, right? He didn't come for anyone else. There was no one else. God only made his covenant with one group of people. And that group of people had black people, white people, uh, Asian people, had people from just all over the known world of their time, which was not very known. No one knew about Canada or North America or South America back then. Nobody knew about that stuff. Their world was very, very small, but there were people from all over. They certainly had people from Africa, and those people at that time were black. They weren't. The Egyptians were black. They weren't pale skinned like they are now. But all of those people became Jews in exactly the same way that the founder of Judaism became a Jew. He wasn't a Jew. He was a Chaldean. His wife was a Chaldean. That made all of their children Chaldeans. And their children married other Chaldeans. I'm saying Hasdai is what they're called. Um, but they were all from Mesopotamia, essentially from Iraq. And how did all those people become Jewish? The same way everybody does to this very day. You're not born a Jew, you become a Jew. How do you become a Jew? You do exactly what Avraham and his entire Hasdai or Chaldean family did. You obey God's law. And Genesis actually says that Abraham obeyed all of God's law. It's in the English text, it says that, because that is what it does say in Hebrew as well. All of it. Oh, that's not even possible. It wasn't given until Sinai. No, that's wrong. At Sinai, as it's actually called, it was finally written down. It was obviously given long before that because Abraham lived by all of it, according to the same man who wrote it down at Sinai. He's the one that said that. So you become Torah observant. And these books, these letters in this New Testament are all about Torah observance. They're not about giving up Torah and going living, under the rules of some other religion. No, it's all about going back to living according to the Torah, just like all of the other Jews did. wasn't about your birth. It was about your lifestyle. I'm looking for something here. I'm looking at everything's so small at this point. I can't. Yeah, this is the letter that was written to the Galatians. I'm looking at chapter 2, and I had to say, I felt like I had to say all of that stuff just so I could jump into this. Um, okay, so Shaul is talking about this, that, and the other. Yeah, I'm gonna have to back up quite a ways. Let me just kind of skim through. Oh, wow. I'm further back than I thought I was going to be. So it starts off Shaul, a shaliach, not from man nor because of man, but from Yeshua HaMashiach. He was sent by Yeshua HaMashiach. Yeshua, the one who's called Mashiach. And and you know what he said after that? And is Yahweh. I was sent by Yeshua HaMashiach and is, or who is Yahweh, who raised himself from death. That's what the Greek text actually said. I know it says Father God, but who's Father God? Yahweh. He just said Yeshua, the Messiah, is the Father. He is Yahweh, who raised himself from death. He starts this letter to the Galatians off like that. This is to all the Torah observant ones, or brothers. Those are Torah observant ones. They can't be brothers otherwise, because he's Torah observant. And if he's calling someone his brother, that has to be someone else who's Torah observant. That's the way it works in biblical Judaism, especially in the Second Temple period when Shaul lived. So with the Torah observant ones with me to the Adat, that's congregations, not churches, in Susa. Now, I had to use that word because we don't know what it was actually called in Hebrew at the time. Grace to you and peace from Yahweh, God our Father, from Yahweh, and the Lord, Yeshua HaMashiach. It's not saying grace to you from both of these people. He's once again saying that Yeshua HaMashiach is God. He is the Lord who gave himself for a Torah rebellion or a sin, or for our sins. Gave himself for our Torah rebellion, for our sin. Sin is Torah rebellion. 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. That he might deliver us from this present evil world according to the Torah, or the will of, I know yours says God and Father, that's Yahweh. So he says some other niceties. He's just introducing himself to these people in doing the small talk at this point. There are some, in verse 7, there are some who stir you up and desire to distort the message, the gospel of Mashiach. What did he mean by that? To distort the message that Mashiach has restored God's covenant. That is the gospel, that God has restored his covenant with his people. How do I know? Because our God reigns. Every Jew should know that. They should know that God said, don't call me your God because I'm not. But one day our God will reign. And the only way our God can reign is if we are in covenant and obedient to our covenant with him. So the gospel is the good news that the covenant has been reinstated. And if the covenant is reinstated, we have to live by it. That's the good news that they're talking about, that in English is called the gospel. Then he says, and to the contrary, if we or messengers from heaven preach a gospel, we know what that is now, right? Other than the message that Mashiach has restored our covenant, other than this gospel, the one that we preach to you, let him be cursed. The only gospel that was preached by any of the Talmudim, that's the real word for disciples, was taken from the Tanakh. There was no New Testament. They were not writing these letters to make a New Testament. They didn't know what a New Testament would be. They never spoke about it. And I promise you, there's no Jew that ever would have written these letters had they known that somebody was going to do this with their letters. The letters written by the Talmudim, the disciples, were all written during their ministry, during their time of working for God, but not put together as a New Testament until 300 years after the last disciple died. And at that point, it still wasn't settled which letters would be used. It was 390 CE before it was ever suggested that the letters that were put together as we know them today in 390 CE, the current era. See, what did they used to say? BC and AD. 390 AD. Let me say it that way in case you don't know what CE is. Current era is what we say now. AD, I think people called it after death or something like that. It's what it became known as. If Yeshua had actually been born in the year zero, because that was the whole idea. You had the BC that the numbers wound down to zero, and then the AD are where they wound up from zero. Right? You guys get that? That's why in the 1900s, okay, let me do it this way. If you say 19th century, you're talking about the 1800s. So if you're saying in the 20th century, you're talking about the 1900s. You see how that works? Because the previous wound down to zero, and then from there, the CE, the current era, winds up from zero. Anyway, probably every one of you knew that. Let's go on because I want to get to something here that sadly has happened. So anyone that preaches contrary to that should be cursed, he says. For now do I persuade man or God, or seek to please men? If yet I please men, I do not serve Mashiach, which he's already said, Mashiach is Yahweh. I don't serve God if I'm worried about what other men think. For I make known to you, Torah observant ones, brothers, others, people following the law like I am, the message that the Mashiach has restored our covenant, the thing they call the gospel, that is preached by me is not according to man. Shaul is not preaching a new gospel created by men or some new wind of doctrine from the mind of men. Instead, Shaul is preaching from the Tanakh, which was given by God. And we can compare what I just said to the Sonsino Babylonian Talmud Tractate Avot, Folio I2 or 1, 2. I think that's an I. Like I said, everything's real small today and I'm having trouble seeing it. But anyway, Shimon, Simon as he's known, Shimon, or Shimon, to say it properly, Shimon the righteous or the just, was from the survivors of the great Knesset or synagogue, the great synagogue as it's known today. He used to say on three things or three words, because we would say Devarim, right? Three words. In English, it makes more sense for our listeners to say three things. On three things, the world stands: on the Torah, on the service, and on showing kindness. To the Yehudim, to the Jews of this time period, the Torah was the divine revelation. When you receive something by revelation in the time of the Jews who wrote the New Testament, that means you receive something from reading and hearing the Tanakh, the what Christians call Old Testament. It wasn't you having some vision drop down from on high. It was from your understanding of something from the Jewish Bible. That was revelation. In short, it was God's way to communicate with man. You know, the book, that was, if you're reading the book and you're hearing the book and you're understanding the book and you're obeying the book, you now know how to hear the voice of God. He said, I did not receive the gospel, the good news, he said, I did not receive it. He's speaking of the gospel nor was I taught by man, but because of the appearance of Yeshua HaMashiach. Shaul did not understand the gospel, the message that God had restored his covenant, until Mashiach appeared on the side of the road and knocked him off his high horse. I love that joke. I wrote it myself. So anyway, he's trying to let his listeners know that he's not talking about some new religion or some new organization that got together and developed all of this new stuff that everybody believes. He's telling his people that what he's teaching came from the Hebrew Bible. And again, that's what the Christian world calls the Old Testament. For you have heard of my former conduct in Yehudim, in Judaism. That's what my former conduct in Judaism. That's what he said. How that beyond measure I persecuted the Adat, no, that's Edah. I don't know why there's a T there. I was just reading my transliteration, but the Hebrew says Edah, so it's congregation. The congregation, not the church, the congregation. The church did not exist when these men were alive. There was no one in the church that was persecuted. There was no Christian persecuted. None of that existed when he wrote these words. The congregation are the people who obey God. Torah observant Jews. That's the congregation he's talking about. how he persecuted the followers of Yeshua because he now realizes Yeshua is God. He was persecuting those people. And he said, advanced in Judaism. He was advancing in Judaism above many of his contemporaries in many nations, being much more zealous of the traditions of my fathers, he said. Not the traditions of the Bible, not the traditions of God, the traditions of his particular fathers. But when it was pleasing, I was taken from my mother's womb and called because of his graciousness. Now he's speaking of God's graciousness to reveal his Mashiach in me. Which is his anointing in me, that I might preach him among the ethnicene. Now, those are the Jews who essentially don't have a rabbi and they don't have a synagogue. It has nothing to do with non-Jews. That's not what they meant when they said goyim, which becomes Gentile. And in Greek, they use the word ethnicene here. In the beginning, I did not consult with flesh and blood. Well, why would you've got the scrolls? He obviously had them. He asked someone to bring some of them with, to him and meet him somewhere. He had scrolls. He was from a very wealthy family. Neither did I go to Jerusalem, which is what Jerusalem was called back then, to those who were shelichim, the sent ones. What do they call that? Apostles in English, before me. But I went to Rav and returned again to Damasek. We're talking about Shaul, he was already a paper-carrying Jew, a rabbi. And he had his encounter with Yeshua, with God. He is not saying that he went off into the wilderness and let the ghost of God fill his head with new information. That's Christianity. That's not what this man's talking about. He didn't know what Christianity was. He simply said that he did not consult with anyone before he left. God had just knocked him off his horse, blinded him for a short while, and he wanted to now know the truth because he just realized that pretty much everything he stood for was a lie. That's a rough way to find out. Then after 3 years, this is a paper-carrying rabbi sent out by the high priest himself to torture the Jews who were following Yeshua. He goes off and studies the Word of God for 3 years. Now, he knows how. He reads, writes, and speaks that language. That's his first language. He's been well trained in everything Jewish and realizes that everything he stood on is wrong. So he knows how to go back and read it critically now and not just accept everything that he was taught growing up. But now he's going to see, well, what does the word actually say? He's not going to bring his bias into it. That's what he's saying he did for 3 years. I went to Jerusalem to get to know Kepa, and I dwelt with him 15 days. But I did not see any other Sheliach. I didn't see any other apostle except Yaakov, the Lord's sibling, so Yeshua's brother, his half-brother. But that which I write you, behold, before God, I do not lie. So he's saying, I swear to God. And it wasn't like people do today and just lie through their teeth after saying something like that. A Jewish rabbi in that time saying, I swear to God, he's telling the truth and will die for what he just said because he did not tell a lie. Afterwards, I came to the regions of Zur and Saar, and it was known and was unknown by face. Nobody knew what the guy looked like. The people that met him face to face were beaten senseless and couldn't remember or died. I mean, this was awful what this man was doing. And of course, he uses the word for congregations in plural here in Yehuda, which were in Mashiach. So he was doing this to the Jews who had accepted the good news that Mashiach had come and that our Torah observance was of vital importance and that our covenant between us and God had been restored. He was going after those people, but they had only heard that he was a bad guy. They didn't know him. They didn't see his face and recognize him, right? So then we get to chapter 2. Then after 14 years, after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas and took Yonech. There's a 14-year jump from chapter 1 to chapter 2. 14-year jump. That happens a lot in the New Testament. And a lot of people think this stuff just happened one thing after the other. And I went up openly and presented to them the good news, which I preached among the Jews that essentially didn't have a synagogue or a rabbi, but privately to those of reputation, lest somehow I should run or had run in vain. He's just saying there are some people that did not want to do the whole Mashiach thing publicly because they're going to lose their job. They're going to lose their livelihood and not going to be able to feed their families. So they weren't real quick to get on board with this. And Yonech, who was with me, being a Greek citizen, not being a Greek, being a Greek citizen. Shaul was a Greek citizen, right? Was not intimidated by the Israeli Jews. What you read is circumcision. That doesn't mean that these people are circumcised and the uncircumcision are not circumcised. It does not mean that at all. The circumcised are the Israeli Jews, the Jews whose first language is Hebrew, the Jews who go to synagogue and show up for the feast at the temple. These are the circumcision. And through the false pretenses of, being brothers, they slipped in to spy on our liberty, which we have in Mashiach Yeshua, to take advantage of us, to whom we yield obedience, not for a moment, that the truth of the message, the good news, continues in you. He talks about these people they were essentially famous. They were big time podcasters or something. But on the contrary, they saw that the gospel, the good news, to the uncircumcision. This does not mean these people are uncircumcised. It means that they're not Israeli. It means that they most likely speak Greek as a first language, or maybe the Italian language as a first language. They're not Israeli. That's the uncircumcision. It does not mean they were uncircumcised. But he's saying, I was entrusted to teach to them, as also the Israelis to Kepa. So what did he just say? He is saying that he went to the non-Israelis and Kepa went to the Israelis. I'm going to have to get to the whole point of what I'm trying to talk about here. So in verse 9, and when they knew the lot, I know you're reading the word grace, but they're talking about your lot. If they're talking about grace, most of the time in the New Testament, lot, L-O-T, your lot in life, that sort of thing. And they knew the lot that was given me. He just told you what it was. He's teaching the non-Israeli Jews, called uncircumcision, but probably circumcised. It had nothing to do with physical circumcision. It was a title. Got the lot that was given me. Yaakov and Kepa and Yochanan, who seemed to be pillars, gave to Barnabas and I papers of ordination. Papers of ordination. He just said that he and Barnabas received papers of ordination from Yaakov. He's already told you this is the brother of Yeshua. Kepa, they know him as Peter these days, and Yochanan, which is the guy they call John these days. Those three men got together and wrote papers of ordination and gave them to Shaul. They call Saul, or is that what they call him? Paul. Sorry, couldn't think of it of the English. And Barnabas. I don't remember the English. Barnabas. Okay. Those two men received papers. How do I know this? Because he said they gave us the right hand of fellowship. Right hand, power. It's always power among the Jews of this time. They're talking about the right hand. They're talking of power. They gave them the power of fellowship. The right hand of fellowship are papers of ordination. And their papers of ordination contained the job they were sent out to do. So these men, Yaakov, what do they call that? James or Jacob, Peter, and John gave Paul and Barnabas papers of ordination that also said that they were to take the good news that Messiah had come and that the covenant was reinstated and everyone needed to follow the law. That's what those papers would have said. That's the right hand, the power of fellowship. That we go among the non-Israelis and they, those other guys, to the Israelis. And this time he didn't say that they were sent to the uncircumcised. He said they were sent to the Goim, as the Gentiles, ethne in Greek. And that the three that gave them the paperwork were sent to the circumcision, the Israelis. So here we're breaking it up. He's already called the non-Israelis uncircumcision, and now he's just calling them Goim. 15 years later. Okay, so then we're getting to where I'm trying to get to. And that we remember the poor, which I also work hard to do. But when Kepha, the guy they call Peter, came to Garash, I resisted him in his presence, is what it means. But he said before his faces, and it does say faces. It's in his presence, is what they mean. It's just the way that you said that back then, because he was at fault. Now he's done something wrong, and Shaul is pointing it out to him personally. They're not having a big argument. He's not being rude. He's not pointing his bony little finger saying, "You're wrong, Peter." To resist him to his face is just a Jewish way of saying, I took him off to the side and spoke to him about something he was doing wrong. They were not rude people. For before some came of Yaakov, so what'd you say? It was Jacob? Yeah, Jacob and his little entourage. Before they came to where Kepha was, Kepha, it says, he ate among the non-Israelis, the ethnon, the goyim, the uncircumcision. You can call them any of those things. You're talking about the Jews who did not come from Israel, basically, Jerusalem. But when they came, James's little or Jacob, or I never can remember who's Jacob and James. But when they came, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing those Israeli Jews. You see what's happening here? He was happy to hang out with these non-Israelis. Now, they're still Jews. He's happy to hang out with them. But as soon as the big boys come to town, woo, he doesn't know any of these people. Do you see what's happening here? We're talking about some major hypocrisy. We're not talking about him eating pork with these people. No, we're talking about him just hanging out with these lesser Jews because that's the way they were seen at that point in time. And hypocritically, the other Jews with him, so the other Israelis with him, so that Barnabas was also led away with their hypocrisy. You understand, we know that Kepha was a poor fisherman, and I forget where he's from. Could be Nazareth, could be Sea of Galilee. So where he was from, I don't know if it ever said, but he was educated via the whole Israeli thing. So they're Israeli because of their education, not the place they're born. All right, that's all I'm trying to say. So Barnabas fell into this whole, okay, we'll hang out with you lesser Jews when the big boys are out of town. And then when the big boys come to town, we're not going to hang out with you guys. But when I saw that they were not progressing towards the whole truth of the gospel, I said to Kepha before his faces, in the presence of all the leaders, he did this right in front of everybody. If you being a Yehudi, if you being a Jew, live like the non-Torah observant Jews, if you being a Jew, live like a non-Torah observant Jew, and do not live like a Jew, someone who's Torah observant, if you are a Jew and you don't live like a Jew, how do you compel the non-observant Jew how do you compel the non-observant Jew to Yaldaizane. Yaldaizane is the Greek word, Judaize. How do you come, if you being a Jew do not live like a Jew, i.e. being Torah observant, if you being a Torah observant Jew do not live like a Torah observant Jew, how on earth do you expect to convert to get other non-Torah observant Jews to be Torah observant Jews? Somehow Christians have flipped this completely around, including this man I have so much respect for, and turned Judaizing into a dirty word. The Judaism is the bad thing. Shaul is saying your whole purpose in life, in leading the children of Israel, is to show them how to live a Torah observant lifestyle. But if you're not going to do that, how do you ever expect to get those other people to live a Torah observant lifestyle? If you, being a Jew, do not live like a Jew, how do you expect others to become Jews? Judaizing was the whole point of what the disciples who followed Yeshua, whether they followed him for 3 years physically, or they studied him for 3 years via the Bible because he knocked him off his horse, that didn't matter. These people were sent by Yeshua, Shaul, the guy they call Paul, included. They were sent out to get other people to be Jews, to Judaize. That's the whole point in what teaching the gospel was. But somehow that's turned completely on its ear. I don't know what to do with that. We who are born Yehudim, we are born Jews, and not sinful, not Torah observant, and not non-Torah observant Israelis, non-Torah observant Jews. We who are born Jews and not the people born into sin. In other words, they weren't raised in Judaism. Knowing that no man is reconciled by the works of Torah without the faithfulness of Yeshua HaMashiach. And we are Torah observant. We are faithful. Emunah, we're Torah observant. If you know anything about the Hebrew language, you should know that's what that means. Sorry, something happened with my screen there, and I am running out of time. Knowing that no man is reconciled by the works of Torah without the faithfulness to live the Torah. That's what they're talking about. That's what he's talking about. To the faithfulness of Yeshua HaMashiach, and we are faithful because of Mashiach, so that we are reconciled by that faithfulness, or the faithfulness of Mashiach, and not from the works of the Torah. We're reconciled by the works of Mashiach, laying down his life and raising it back up. We're still on that same subject from the very beginning. That does not change. It has not changed. This is what he's been talking about from the beginning. For by the works of Torah, no flesh is made righteous. By the works of Yeshua, his laying down his life and raising it back up, and us being faithful to live out the life that he showed all of us, Torah observance. The New Testament says that Yeshua was Torah observant over and over and over again. So the whole point in the New Testament letters, according to Shaul, Paulos, the guy they call Paul, was that being hypocritical, being okay with hanging out with the lesser Jews, the people who didn't know enough Judaism to either, they were born Jews, they were circumcised on the 8th day, but they had no rabbi, they had no synagogue, they didn't even speak the Hebrew language. You'll hang out with them when the big guys are out of town, but they show up and you won't hang out with them. You'll act like you're too good for them. Really? You think that's going to lead these people to be Torah observant? The whole point of Judaizing is to make everybody else be a Jew. That's what Shaul is saying. That's what you're supposed to be doing, Kepa. And you being a hypocrite is making that whole thing not work. So Judaizing is not a bad thing. Judaizing should not be treated like a bad word. It is the point, the entire point of all of the New Testament letters. I'm out of time. Shalom v'shalom, everybody.
The blessing, Be'ivrit. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.